Hi, my name is Lisa, and welcome to the first episode of Cherry Hill Squares with Cooper Levenson attorneys Alexandra Rigdon and Cynthia Grob. Today, Lexi and Cynthia will be answering a few questions on family law and COVID-19. Lexi, Cynthia, welcome.
Thank you. It's
Hi
good to
there.
see you guys virtually.
I know. I know. Everything's done virtually now. Okay, so we're going to dive right into our questions. The first question is for Lexi. So the first question is, what happens if my co-parent isn't socially distancing?
Well, that's a tough one, and it's kind of incapable of a straightforward answer in these circumstances. You basically have three options in that circumstance. You can trust that your co-parent is acting in your child's best interest and do nothing. And we have a lot of clients who are they're abiding by their custody orders as they were, and they're not really doing anything about it. And then they're just sort of crossing their fingers and hoping that everybody is doing the right thing. The best thing to do would be, if you're concerned, is to talk to your co-parent if you have that type of a relationship. And if you don't, I would suggest, to the extent you can, you try to get it, because this is hopefully a once in a lifetime situation, and you're going to need to try to work together. And you could talk to your co-parent and say, are you working from home? Are you not working from home? Are you able to work from home? And who are you around on a consistent basis? And what are their quarantine protocols? And I don't think in these circumstances that's intrusive. I think it's basically a common sense type of thing. But if co-parents are not able to do that now, and unfortunately there are going to be people that just can't, then this is going to sound self-serving, but if you're really concerned, that might be a time to consult an attorney and figure out a way forward, whether that is having counsel communicate with your co-parent, or as a last resort, utilizing the court system. And that would be a last resort, just because we just can't predict what a judge is going to rule in these circumstances. It is so fact specific. If you have somebody that just says, my ex is a landscaper and I have them outside my house right now. My ex is a landscaper. I don't like that he's, in and out of people's yards and then coming home. That might not be enough for a judge to intervene. But we've also heard of cases on the flip side where in different states, I read an article recently where somebody filed an emergency application because the ex was an ER doctor and the judge took away her parenting time. And I've personally experienced with a judge in a case where, the judge said, listen, and this was a newborn, an infant. The judge said, the flu's dangerous, measles are dangerous, corona's dangerous, it's all dangerous. That is not a reason to strip a parent of parenting time. And then another judge in a different robe on a different bench might say the exact opposite, and might say, if you're still going to the store, you're not social distancing, you're still working outside of the home, then parenting time needs to change. So I think that in terms of a plan forward, the best course of action is to try to talk to your co-parent and work out a solution, because resorting to the courts is going to be an uncertain outcome for you. And the court might say, follow the order follow the order. There's no basis for a change right now.
Great. Thank you so much. The next question is for Cynthia. And this question is, what types of matters are family courts open for right now?
Right, and I think that piggybacks on some of the stuff that Lexi was talking about. So initially, under the emergency orders in New Jersey, the courts had limited function. They were open only to emergent matters with regards to family, and there was a difficulty because some personal appearances were required. And as the state further entered into the shutdown, the court has actually adapted, and now has video conferencing in place. So while things might take a little longer over the regular course of a divorce matter or something like that, the courts are now open for filings. There is no in-person appearances that are necessary. And we now, as family law practitioners, have access to online filing or e-filing, so that any matter can be filed and proceed. The matters that are getting priority, of course, are emergent type matters. If there is an emergency, the courts are open for that function. As Lexi indicated, however, our advice is that if you can work out your issues, even if it's just on a temporary basis with your co-parent or your ex-spouse or your current spouse, to just get some rules for the game during the COVID period, we think that you're better off, because as Lexi indicated, every courtroom has a different human being manning it. So while judges are required to abide the rules of the state, the court rules, and the case law, they are also tasked right now with being creative, as they have been in getting video conferencing up and running and adapting the court processes to our new reality right now.
Great, thank you. Lexi, the next question is for you. And the question is, what should someone do if they cannot afford their support obligation?
Well, that sort of goes back to exactly what I said before, which is that the best way to move forward with that is to talk to the person that either owes you support or you owe support to, because we've got, I think, over 6 million people out of work right now. A lot of people laid off, furloughed, people also who are still working who just aren't making as much money anymore, you know, small business owners with restaurants and everything like that. And so the best thing to do really is to go to the person that you're paying or who's paying you and say, what are we going to do in this situation? I don't have enough money to pay $200 a week in child support, for example. I can pay you $100, and then when this is over, let's work something out. And that's going to be one in the hand is worth two in the bush. What you don't want to have happen is where somebody says, nope, you got to give me the 200. That's what the order said. I don't care about your financial situation. And then the person says, oh, forget about it. You're not getting anything right now. I'm not going to work with you. I'm not saying that that's necessarily allowed by any order, but that's human nature. And also, if somebody has to file a motion to either modify their support or get the support to be paid where they could have just worked it out, then you're going to be waiting weeks. And you're going to have to spend time. And if you get an attorney, you're going to have to incur attorney's fees, literally throwing good money after bad, when it would be the path of least resistance is to try to figure out a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound type of situation in terms of the support. And then another thing to remember is that the alimony statute actually has a prohibition on any modifications before a certain time period is passed. So you might be in a situation where you lost your job and you're not actually empowered by the statute to file for a modification yet. And when this statute was written 5 or 6 years ago, obviously nobody was considering a pandemic, and who knows, maybe they'll have to update it at some point to account for world hazards. But at this point, again, much easier to try to come to an agreement on support than running to court. And you can always try to make it up on the back end. And then if you just say, you know what, I'm not paying anymore, this is not fair, and you go to court eventually and you do modify it, well, you might have had a lot of arrears that accrued during that time, and you're going to have to be digging out to try to get out from under that obligation. You could have worked something out. So that's the best advice. And obviously, if it's something that can't be figured out, it is truly best to at least have a consultation with an attorney and try to figure out what your rights are and what your path forward is to paying those obligations or collecting on those obligations.
Great, thanks, Lexi. And Cynthia, this next one's for you. What are strategies for dealing with my spouse who I want to or am divorcing during quarantine?
So this is a pretty difficult question, and it's something that we have consulted with a number of people about since the inception of this matter. Certainly, if you were contemplating divorce and hadn't yet filed right before you were quarantined with your current spouse, or if the quarantine and being in the home a majority of the time has kind of caused previous tensions that you weren't really aware of to explode, you do want to act with an abundance of caution, right? It is not easy to find a place to shelter outside of your home right now. So what we have been talking with clients about doing is finding a safe place for themselves to go in the home, kind of trying to create a truce where people are working with each other, maybe not together, but to be able to separate within their home and to define their own space, whether it's that they find separate sleeping quarters, they define separate working quarters, but that people are conscious of the necessity to make it work in the short term. It doesn't mean that people can't start doing some long-term planning. Certainly in the consultation with an attorney during this time, we do virtual consultations both by video and conference call all the time. And I think in those conversations, you can start to begin to understand your rights, your obligations, And instead of having an uninformed conversation with your spouse because you're suddenly confined with them and you want to start things moving forward, you're more empowered if you have that informed conversation. And certainly if people understand what their rights and obligations are, and then they can utilize this time to start getting their affairs in order, pulling the financial information they might need together because they're at home and they have some time on their hands, or contemplating what assets are available or will be available or continue to be available because of the recent changes. Really finding a plan to move forward. So it is not, I don't think it's advisable for folks to face these issues head on, because you don't want to get into a circumstance where the tension boils over and someone is placed in danger. But I think that trying to preemptively discuss strategies for what things will look like as you move forward may be an empowering way to handle some of the stress. As Lexi and I were talking about, you can certainly still be filing for divorce. You can, right now the courts are open to that process. That when you do file, it secures a date and time that your separation will commence, at least financially. So there are ways to continue to move forward, but I think that people need to do so with a conscious effort, especially if they're going to be sharing their home with the person that they're choosing to embark on this path with. I think there needs to be a little bit of caution in doing so.
And I would also just add that if they both have attorneys, don't talk about the case in the house, because there's nowhere to escape. You can't go blow off steam at the mall with retail therapy like we'd all like to do. So avoid that. And also, I know Cynthia has been in this situation, and I have too. Don't air your grievances about your spouse on social media. Just don't do it. Somebody invariably sees it, sends it to the spouse, then the spouse sends it to us, and then it's like just throwing gasoline on a fire. It's just a bad idea. It's common sense, but I think everybody's a little crazy right now, and they're doing things a little bit out of character. So,
while it might be tempting,
yes,
you might want to avoid that use of your social media as an outlet.
Absolutely.
Great advice. I know that a lot of people could heed that advice. So definitely good advice. Great. And then the final question that we have today are, what are resources that are out there to help with stress during this time?
Right. So one technique that I have clients right now who are active and engaged in a divorce process that started just before the state shutdown, and they are forced to live together in a 500 square foot apartment. What we have found useful, my client and I, is for my client has downloaded some meditation apps and some calming apps so that when tensions get high, she can retreat to the space that they've identified as her space versus his space. And she has had a good success utilizing some of those applications to just find some time for herself and to decompress with regards to not thinking about this process, and or the fact that she suddenly shut in with the spouse that she knows she'll no longer be married to at the conclusion of the shutdown. There also are other resources out there on our website, which is Cooper Levenson, www.cooperlevenson.com. It links to a bunch of blogs that have been written by all sorts of attorneys from all different backgrounds related to the COVID-19 issues that our clients are facing. But one of those blogs is a blog that talks about child and domestic abuse and the resources that are available to people if they're experiencing something that's concerning for them in their home. There are there are links there for the New Jersey hotlines that assist people who are going through a crisis of whether it's domestic violence or child abuse. But there's also a resource there that's a family services resource. It's fully confidential. That's a hotline that allows someone who might be experiencing stress and they want to prevent some explosive event from happening. This is a hotline that's available for folks to call into, to get a live person to talk to try to help. Those are trained volunteers that try to just help people on a path to diffusing those problems. And then, of course, the other resources to go out, as we've discussed, and find an attorney to consult with. There is no ban on attorneys working with clients in New Jersey. We've been deemed essential employees. We are accessible. Lexi and myself, all the attorneys at our firm, and many other attorneys out there are accessible and available to help guide folks through this kind of stress and this process.
Great. Thank you so much. So that really concludes this session. Lexi, Cynthia, do you have anything else to add before we sign off?
The only thing I can add in terms of trying to deal with this quarantine is it's easy to want to sort of isolate yourself, and it's depressing and it's sad and it's anxiety producing, but getting outside and exercising, I hate to sound like my mother because she's always saying that, but getting outside and exercising, and I've even started coloring, which, is something that I never really thought I would do, but it's so relaxing and it really puts you in the moment, and it sort of forces you to think outside of yourself. And that's really what we have to do in these times, especially for clients that are dealing with family law issues. Go buy a bicycle if you can find one somewhere, ride around the block, take a walk, try to utilize this time as productively as possible to try to find new outlets for stress, because this is definitely a stressful time, but we will all come through it sooner rather than later, hopefully.
Great.
Yep, I totally agree.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Lexi.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Cynthia. I miss you guys.
I know, we miss in-person contact.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for joining. You can find all of this information along with Lexi and Cynthia's information and how to contact them at www.cooperlevenson.com. We know that this is a stressful time, and we hope that everyone's navigating it well, and we hope that everyone stays safe and healthy. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, gals.
Bye-bye.
Bye.